So I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, a lot of discourse on why people don't trust the experts anymore. And the reason for this, I think, is that we have conflated real experts versus fake experts. And so what do I mean by this? Real experts are people who have learned through experience about their topic subject of special expertise and can make predictions about it that are more accurate than the average layperson. And what you find is a lot of supposed experts are actually less accurate than a completely uneducated person. And then there is a category of people who on some of these topics are actually considerably better than the average person, and the term is integrators. And a good example of this is with predicting elections. Elections happen rarely, and it seems like to be a real expert, you need a few things. You need to have stuff you can make predictions come up regularly, and you need to have accountability, to some degree at least, for if you make inaccurate predictions. So I guess that's two things, right? And so if you look at elections, they happen pretty rarely. So experts don't have a lot of time to actually learn from experience. And they're also not held to account for getting things wrong. And it was fascinating to me because Nate Silver, who was consistently better at predicting elections than the average pundit, and yet the media tended to treat him, when he called one of the, I think it was the 2012 election exactly, they were like, oh wow, this is amazing, and they sort of lionized him. But then when he called the 2016 election supposedly incorrectly, they completely excoriated him in a way that they did not for pundits who had been much more confident that Hillary was going to win and gave Trump like a 0% chance of winning. And Nate Silver had actually said he gave Trump like a 1 in 5, 1 in 6 chance of winning. And if he did, it would be at least 50-50 that it would be through losing the popular vote while winning the Electoral College. And if he won, it would almost certainly be through the supposed blue wall states in the Midwest that were not actually as safe as people thought. So he was much more accurate in his predictions, but there was no way, based on polling, to get the prediction that Trump was more likely to win than Clinton. And so even though he was more accurate in a lot of his details, the people who define who an expert is were like, oh wow, he's been completely discredited after calling that one election wrong, while the people who were like, Trump has 0 chance of winning, they continued to treat as serious experts because he was an outsider and they were insiders. But Silver is an example of an integrator, of someone who has a lot of knowledge about a lot of different topics and has predictions based on seeing similar patterns before, which I realized I am an integrator myself. But I also, one thing about it is also knowing how strong your predictions are, which is something Silver is good about. And that's actually one of the reasons I don't think Polymarket would work, is because if it works like other prediction markets, and I have not actually looked into this, then how much you can bet on any given event is capped. Because the way you would make money on something like that would be finding a few things where you are really confident that the consensus is wrong and betting big on them. And yet if it's capped, then you can't make enough money for it to be worthwhile on those things. And where you're less confident, you're more likely to lose money, especially if you're going against people with insider knowledge. And so, like, I am really confident on the predictions I make when I say I'm really confident. But there's a lot of things that I don't know. And when I was younger, I used to I would get something right and people would be like, hey, can you predict this? And I would try to make a guess. And I would often be wrong because it was just a guess that was not informed by the same kind of things where I make actual predictions. And so I'm not claiming like I'm like a savant, like expert on everything. I'm just claiming that in a lot of fields where experts don't get feedback on whether they were wrong and don't face penalties for being wrong, almost certainly when I'm confident about something and I tell you I'm confident, I'm going to be right way more often than the supposed experts. But anyways, so there are fields where, like political forecasting, where you just don't get enough feedback. And then there are fields where you take out the skin in the game, the consequences for the people making these predictions. And a good example of this that I've come back to a few times is dietary science. It used to be dietary science was advanced by practitioners helping people lose weight. And the understanding was that carbohydrates, and especially sugar, were the main issues for weight gain. And then research scientists with no accountability and an agenda decided that the main issue was fat and began promoting that. Also, they believe fat caused heart disease and possibly diabetes. And so they began pushing that, and they pushed the government to push that, and the supposed experts became these researchers and policymakers with no actual expertise helping people lose weight. And the statistics show that like it's high 90% of people trying to do diet and exercise do not lose substantial weight long term. And instead of taking that as a sign that it's almost impossible or that they're taking the wrong approach, they're just like, oh, everyone is just too lazy to do this. Like we've suddenly had a laziness epidemic, or it's been about food and there's suddenly food tastes way better so people eat more of it, as opposed to what it actually mainly is, which is that the government has not only pushed cheap commodity crops that tend to be highly insulinogenic, but also suppressed the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis and pushed the lipid hypothesis, which lipid hypothesis actually says fat causes heart disease. But then calories in, calories out, as a measure for evaluating does this approach work, is a good one. But they've treated it as the basis for how diet should operate predictively, which it does not. Yeah, so I wanted to introduce this topic of you have real and fake experts. And so they're a real expert if they will make predictions based on experience. They've had a lot of feedback where they've had consequences for getting the feedback wrong, and stick with them and actually have consequences for getting it wrong. And those experts do really well. Like I think they do considerably better than integrators, but certainly those experts are real experts. The problem is most supposed experts today either don't have enough feedback on testable predictions they've made to see if they were right, or if they do, they don't face any consequences for it. And so those experts, they're BS artists who are selling you a bill of goods, and they're less trustworthy than certainly asking multiple, like, grannies at the senior center or whatever, or multiple of your neighbors, but probably less reliable generally than even asking, like, one random person on the street. So I wanted to talk about that quickly, and I'll link to a couple of articles on this. I don't have specific books on it, but I do want to talk about this because I've talked about real and fake experts, and so I want to have this video to point to. So thanks for watching. I'm Magpie. I'll see y'all in the next one.